Hi, I'm Nicola.
And I'm Giulia.
And we're the project leaders from YMCA Malta on the My Voice to Europe project.
My Voice to Europe is an Erasmus Plus project co-funded by the European Union that is being administered through the European Union Programmes Agency.
My Voice to Europe has brought together a group of young people to share their thoughts, ideas, and research on topics that they deemed important for the Maltese Islands.
These young people have developed 13 important themes and produced 13 podcasts with stakeholders, young people, and professionals related to the theme.
Keep watching and engage with the discussion in the comments.
Hello, welcome to this podcast about youth and power of expression. My name is Patricia and I have with me two guests, which will be answering some questions. I want to go ahead and start with a question, and I want you two to introduce yourselves and to tell us why you are here today.
Okay, so shall I go first?
As you want.
Okay, so I'm Emma Portelli Bonnici. I feel like I'm on the fringe of youth, but I'll take it. I'm very glad to still be making the cut. I'm a lawyer by profession, and I have my own law firm, which I run with my business partner and colleague, Dr. Martina Caruana. Our law firm is PB&C. It's special because obviously it's special because we built it from the ground up, but it's also special because it's trauma-informed and human-centered, which is something that you can't find elsewhere here. I also run Għajjejt Xbajt, which is a Maltese term that means sick and tired, which is an Instagram page with my friend Sophia Rooney. And I also run Lawyers for Choice with some other incredibly talented lawyer friends of mine, Jenny Salling and Desiree Attad, and we have a number of other members in Lawyers for Choice as well. I'm a feminist and a pro-choice activist aside from being a lawyer.
Perfect. Now moving on.
Hi, thank you so much for this invite. My name is Magri. I think I'm on the fringe of youth as well, but youthful at heart. I am a journalist. I have been working in the field of journalism now for the past 6 years. I'm a journalist with Times of Malta. Before that, I was a journalist with the Malta Independent, and for the past 4 years, I've been a journalist with Times of Malta. I specialize a lot in, I feel like I have my fingers in many pies when it comes to what I report and what I write about. There are moments when I'm covering parliament, so very political. There are moments when I'm speaking to people on the ground, people literally knocking on people's doors, trying to understand what their issues are, everyday life issues. When it comes to cost of living, it can come to issues that are human interest issues, so migration, women's rights, anything and everything really. But I must admit that as an individual, I suppose I really enjoy the human stories, right? The quirky stories, that someone who really catches your attention because they're doing something amazing, or is it someone who is going through a really how can I explain it? Someone is experiencing something and they just need to be heard, and I'm very happy to be that person that they trust, and that they trust me to record and report their story. So yeah, that's me in a nutshell.
Very nice to hear that. Now, how can you best describe expression?
Maybe I can go. Expression. It's really funny when I read that question the first time. I thought, wow, it's something I use every day, and it took me a minute. I'm not going to lie. I guess expression is the way you are putting out your feelings and your thoughts, and that can be done in an array of different ways, right? So I guess people would think of human expression, right? If I'm happy, I'm laughing. If I'm sad, I'm crying. There's artistic expression, right? Something that is, someone wants to portray an image, they can do that through lyrics, music, dance, poetry. It's amazing, right? The way you can express how you're feeling. The written word, I suppose, as well, that is also included. Yeah, and I think that's why it took me a while to really think about it, because there are so many ways we can express ourselves, and it's such a beautiful thing that we live on a planet that you can do even just like express happiness in so many different ways, right? So I think that's how I would describe expression. Emma, I don't know if you want
Oh,
to
I'm
add
so
on.
glad you went first because you did it way better than I could. I was going to talk about like fashion and like no, but
It's fashion. It's so true.
yeah, no,
Yeah.
yours is great. It was really succinct and like exactly what I would have wanted to say.
So you don't want to add anything to
No, I'm good. I'm good. That's a solid one for expression. I mean, exactly what Julia said, and I was just going to mention like how you look, how you dress,
Yeah.
your colored hair, what glasses you pick in the morning, you know, like that kind of.
Yeah.
It's just
Okay.
more of the same.
So I think you have kind of answered that, but what does the power of expression mean to you?
I think expression can be super, super powerful. Expression is important even just when you're in a place. It could be a form of expression. Sort of being present could be a form of expression. So, for example, Julia mentioned the different forms of expression, like expression through art, expression through fashion, expression through literature, whatever. But there's also expression through the things that I attend, the vigils I go to, the protests I go to, the art exhibitions I go to, the places I frequent. And for example, because I know one of the questions is probably going to be like an example about this, so I'm just going to throw in an example now. Like there are, for example, like members only clubs, right? They're a thing all around the world. So there are some of them that used to be only open to men. So I think that it's already an idea of power to be there now.
Yes.
And I understand that I'm sure there are some of the men there who go there now who kind of wish it was still just for men. I mean, I'm sure that most of them are enlightened, but I'm certain that there's one, two, or three who would prefer it to still be, 1960. But that being said, expression just by being there is already expression in and of itself, you know. So I think like being where you want to be and making your presence known is already a pretty solid form of expression.
And I want to add on to what Emma said. I completely agree with what Emma's saying. And I think when you have that power of expression, um, it also includes the feeling of being safe, that you feel safe expressing this, right? You feel safe that you are something so simple, like you're saying, you're in this club, you are, or you are attending this exhibition, you know that your presence there, you being there, it feels safe, right? And we know that um, that made me think about like Emma's saying, there were these men's clubs where, women weren't safe to go there and have their presence there, where we still have the situation where there are certain groups or people who can't even express themselves, right? They can't express this sense of I should be here. It's my right to be here, right? Because like we're saying, expression, I think from what we're getting, expression is a human right. And some people don't have that right. And that's what made me think about the power of expression. Like Emma said, that you can attend these things, that you can express these things, and there is that safety. And I think there is also the responsibility, right? Like what you are how you know what you're doing there. So, for example, one of the examples that came to mind, for example, was protesting. We have, for example, Women's International Day tomorrow, and I saw on my social media loads of people were saying, why are we celebrating this day when there are so many people? I don't like to make this so political, but at the end, it's something, it is political, At the end of the day, we have women in Palestine, so thousands of women who are being killed, and how can we celebrate this when nothing is being done for them? And that ties into, again, this role of, okay, this is making me upset. This is making me angry. How am I going to express that feeling? Am I going to write a book? Am I going to go and write a song? Or am I going to make my voice heard and hopefully being heard by the people in authority that can hopefully do something about this, right? I'm aware. I feel like the power of expression is such a big thing, right? It took me a lot to think about in my morning to put this all in my head. But because again, it's something that I feel like we experience every day, and we don't really sit down and be like, why am I doing this? You know, but
We also take it for granted.
yeah, we
And
take it for granted, for sure.
I mean, I think living through 2023 and 2024 now has taught us that perhaps we shouldn't, because when war used to be a faraway concept, it's now closer than ever, really. You know, we
Agreed.
have so much of it all around us. Opening the news in the morning is an ordeal in and of itself, and that's just reading the news. So then you start to think, I'm so lucky that I'm just reading it. Maybe I do have a duty to read it, even though it's really sad and really hard to do. So there's a lot that really, like, there's a lot of interplay there, and it's very hard to dissect exactly how I feel about it.
Yeah, for sure. So I think that's our take on of power of expression, and you know, and I guess as well, power of expression comes to what else I think about it is like holding an opinion or receiving it. Like I think the power of expression is also you obtaining this expression. You know, so like we're talking about the news. You know, that is a power. That is a freedom of expression, and I have that right to obtain it, but there are other countries, excuse me, that don't have that right. So is that hindering on the power of expression? That there is expression out there, there is information and thoughts that are being held back from me because of the way they might make me feel and make me think. So
Okay.
yeah, something else to put out there.
A lot to chew on.
Yes.
Since both of you gave me an example, actually more than one example, I would like to ask if in Malta, how can one freely express themselves, and what are the means?
I mean, I think a lot of people in Malta express themselves via social media, which is great. But I think a lot of people have started to express themselves more via protests. And I think that started with the 2021 protests from December. Was it 2021?
2019.
19?
Yeah.
Wow, really am on the youth, guys. So that's been a while.
It's been a while.
Okay, the 2019 protests in Malta, which sort of, I think, catalyzed for a lot of Maltese people how protests can actually implement change. So before there would be protests, you'd have smaller protests, a lot of NGO protests, which are great, and I would never want them to stop. But while some of them were successful, the successes weren't felt in the same sort of ripple effect as they were after the 2019 protests. And I think for that was quite a turning point for many Maltese people to think, or Maltese residents to see, like, if I do this, I can actually affect change. Something might actually happen by being there. So yes, it's a massive hassle. Like those protests, I remember I was sick as a dog after them. I was on like a handbag full of medications after I'd gotten soaked in the rain 3 times. It took me 3 hours to get home. I was so unwell. And it was a huge undertaking to go every day for like 2 weeks and then turn up at work the next day and be fully functional and all of this. It's a massive undertaking for people. You'd see people with their whole families, the elderly, kids. So, I mean, for me, just at the time, a single person who was living at her parents' house, like it was a huge undertaking, let alone for people with families, and you have to do your kids' homework when you get back home, but they were there. It was incredible to see everyone there. Like so many people turned up. And again, at the protests for the public inquiry related to Jean-Paul Sophia, those were incredible to see those photos. And I mean, I feel like the way that sort of encouraged people to go out and to make their voices heard was a really beautiful thing to watch. So that's one way that you can express yourself in Malta. Obviously, there are also others. I mean, letters to the editor, Instagram, you know, there are a million ways to do it. But those, I think, are some of the very effective ways to do that.
Completely agree with Emma. I mean, as a journalist, I mean, I was on the ground in 2019, and the sheer amount of people that would turn up every day, it was, like I had to turn up there because it is my job to report what's going on and everything, but you would see the mass amount of people outside Parliament, outside Castilian, you're like, wow. And it was a very powerful feeling, and it could be also a bit emotional, especially recently with the Jumbo Sophia inquiry. That is a really good example of freedom of expression. So, and it really began with just one woman, right? It began with Isabel Bonnici, Jumbo Sophia's mother, literally saying, my son just died. What are we going to do about it? We need to understand why, and she literally brought a whole island together, and that was a very powerful moment. And like Emma's saying, it's very powerful because, again, we had the government saying no public inquiry, and then the next day, an intense and a very important U-turn happened, and we saw the government saying, okay, we have a public inquiry, the family wants this, clearly the country wants this. So it just goes to show how powerful that expression is. Again, like we were saying, so expression can be writing and everything, and this was the expression of voice and people coming together. And like Emma said, I think something else that is becoming, I think it was always around in Malta, but it wasn't as loud as like the art movement. I've been seeing a lot and attending. I wish to attend more, but I've been attending a bit more art exhibitions, which have quite a powerful message, which, sometimes it's about, can be about rape, it can be about trauma, it can be so many topics. A lot, like when we had last year when we had the Euro Pride, there were some really beautiful art exhibitions. Again, art exhibitions you would attend and say, wow, I can't imagine attending this even 5 years ago. I feel like it's become a much stronger community. And again, with that expression of art, it's really moved forward. So,
Okay. Do you believe that freedom of expression is supported in Malta, and why?
yeah, I believe it's important in Malta. For sure, as a journalist, I must admit, I mean, and Emma too, as a lawyer, I'm sure we'll be like, definitely, it's very important. The question would be, and I think it's one of the questions we have prepared for us is, is it actually portrayed as important? Do we actually safeguard this? And that's where, the question marks and the problems start to come up. For example, one of my duties, right, is to obtain, information and the truth. And sometimes to get that, it is such an uphill struggle. It's such a battle. So, case in point, recently, the Daphne Caruana Galizia Foundation, after fighting a 2-year legal battle with the film commissioner, finally got the figure of how much the presenter David Williams was paid, right? But why did it have to take 2-year legal battle? And prior to that, as journalists, we were constantly asking these questions. We were constantly asking, like, how much did this film how much did it cost? And we weren't asking this for fun. We were asking this because this is the people's money that is being spent on this, and people deserve to know this truth. People deserve to obtain this information, and I need to give it to them. It shouldn't be upheld. I mean, Times of Malta, us ourselves, we had filed freedom of information, right? So maybe I can explain this for listeners who don't know what that is. It's, after you send the questions, after you go to the ministers and the government constantly asking questions, you then go to actually file a written request asking for these documents. Like, that's kind of like the last thing you do. And even those were not provided to us because of commercial sensitivity, and this is something that actually the Daphne Caruana Galizia public inquiry one of the recommendations of this inquiry is that, you know, we actually change this law of the freedom of to obtain the freedom, I'm mixing this up, freedom of information request, right? So it's not so strict because this is a right that we're keeping ourselves, the government is keeping to themselves, and it shouldn't be the case. But I don't know, I kind of answered two questions, or maybe
No, I think that was a really good answer. I mean, I totally agree with that. And I was just going to go into it from a legal point of view because
yes, that would be
you
great.
know, there are the laws in place. It is a fundamental human right. As we know, it's enshrined in our constitution. But the reality is that a fundamental human right without the appropriate framework, there are still things missing from a legal point of view, like especially in relation to journalists, which again, the Daphne Caruana Galizia Foundation has brought to light many times. For example, SLAP laws and, you know, all of these things. But I think beyond what we need to figure out from a legal perspective, I think society really needs to catch up. So I think even if you boil it down to the completely unpolitical, well, everything's political, but not partisan, right?
Yeah.
If you take it down to how many young people can tell their grandparents that they don't believe in God, you know, something really basic like that. Or even when you talk about LGBTIQ rights, for example, how many people are comfortable to live their, you know, their true selves publicly? How many people are afraid of employment repercussions if they get pregnant, for example? You know, these are all, I think, even though the laws are there, because all of these people are protected under the law in the scenarios I just gave, but they're not, because how many people do we hear on an everyday basis who are, you know, prejudiced? How many people do we hear about who are discriminated against? How many people do we hear about who lose their jobs on probation for no reason at all because they're pregnant? Or, you know, so I think the laws are there, the framework is pretty solid. Obviously it could use some work, but it's okay, it's not so terrible. But the reality is that unless our society catches up with that law, and unless there is a drive for education across the board, then I don't think we can ever really use those laws comfortably. You know, I don't think we can ever, you know, like rest comfortably because the laws are there. It needs to be like a holistic thing. It's laws, great, society, you know, we're still here. How can you benefit from this? I mean, while it is important and it is also, you know, supported in Malta to have freedom of expression, I think there is more that needs to be done. And I think it's from more of a societal and educational point of view than from a legal point of view. Lord.
That's a really good point, actually, about education. It's something that's completely slipped my mind. Yeah, for sure.
We're both.
Is there a correct or incorrect way to express oneself publicly?
A correct or incorrect way? Yes, I think you know the way you definitely there is, because if you are going to be hurtful or, you know, racist or sexist or anything in your views, it can be this is a bit of a, you know, this is a very touchy situation, but I do feel that when you are very hateful and your views are actually, rather than a kind of spreading an information, you are spreading a hateful thought or hurtful thought, then I think yes, you should be responsible in maybe the way you portray that, or not saying it at all. But that's just me.
No, I mean, I fully agree with that. All rights are limited. Rights are not, you know, you don't just have, I don't know, the right to liberty. It doesn't mean my time should all be free time and I shouldn't work because I have the right to liberty. You know, it doesn't, everything is limited. Every right has a limitation, and fundamental human rights are limited in order to make space for things like hate speech, for libel laws, for defamation, etc. But as Giulia was saying, it's imperative that when we express ourselves, we do so not at the detriment of other people. So yes, there is a right and a wrong way to express yourself. I think the right way to do so is to do so without hurting other people or infringing their rights.
And I think we're in a really strange period of time because of social media, right? Like Emma mentioned, a lot of people feel that they express themselves more on social media, and some people might feel the way they feel they might are more free and comfortable to express more hateful and hurtful thoughts and expressions because they feel they're protected behind the screen, right? You're not actually in front of that person. And I feel like it's a very strange time because then we have this whole argument of, is it hate speech? Isn't it freedom of expression? And these are really important debates to have. And like Emma mentioned again, this is where we really bring in education, where we really say, okay, this is what freedom of expression is. This is hate comments. This is racist comments. This is, I feel like it's also tied into being a basic, proper, decent human being. I don't know, but I feel like maybe it's a culture thing as well. All these kind of topics and questions merge together. Then.
This goes into the balance of things with everything. Every legal right is balanced against others, like my right to exist peacefully doesn't mean that my neighbor can't ever play loud music.
Yeah.
It's that until 11, they can do that, and then they need to turn it down so that I can sleep,
Yeah.
So everyone has this sort of balance of rights, and I think that that's a really important thing to take into consideration. And if people are wondering if their freedom of expression is limited and whether they should be protected under freedom of expression or whether they're venturing into hate speech, I think all they need to do is check their privilege, honestly. Is what you're saying hurting someone else? Are you being hurt by being asked to tone it down, for example? Is there another way you can say what you're wanting to say without being a cruel human being? And if there is, maybe just, I don't know, just do that. Just please stop being mean. So, not that hard.
Now, in today's world, how do you best believe youths have or do not have the ability of freedom to express themselves?
I think this stems from knowledge being power. I think youths have more access to knowledge now than they ever had before. I think with social media, for all of its negatives, there are also a lot of positives. You can learn a new skill from your phone. I mean, imagine I had Duolingo when I was young. Maybe I would have passed Italian once, like it would have been great, but I didn't. So I didn't. So youth do have a lot of opportunities nowadays to learn things that we may not always have had access to. So you can learn about American politics by following 3 or 4 people on Instagram, then doing your own research by signing up for, I don't know, a news. I don't want to mention one in particular, but news from one portal in the US, for example, if that's what interests you. You can follow how you can start jarring your own food on TikTok. Like, it's incredible what you can learn now. Like, knowledge is literally power, and the more you know, the more you'll be able to express yourself. And as we said, there's that balance, right? So expressing yourself and not hurting other people. And the best way to figure out how to go about that is by knowing your rights, knowing your limitations, and understanding how to go about expressing yourself in a way that's healthy, expressing yourself, having boundaries, ensuring that the people around you sort of understand where you're at. Obviously, it depends what you're expressing, if it's an opinion, if it's a way of life, if it's a belief, whatever. So, change it accordingly. But I think, again, start from understanding yourself, start from understanding what you're trying to express, and then go at it, have at it, like, enjoy. It's great.
Yeah, I think what I would like to add to Emma's comments is actually do get involved, right? Because we see a lot. I mean, from what I can see, like maybe locally as well, and from pages on social media, like I feel like Emma's saying, power is my goodness, not power. Knowledge is power, right? And involvement is power, and knowledge as well together. So it's really good that you are taking this all in, being more involved, learning, but it's also important to involve yourself. I feel like, unfortunately, again, from my perspective as a journalist, I see we have the figures, there was a study yesterday showing that it was a social media study showing that I believe it was the ages of 16 to 18 go on Instagram or Facebook and everything, and they don't look at news portals, unless that news is actually on TikTok. I'm not on TikTok, so I don't know what's being shown on TikTok. And I was thinking, do we need to go on TikTok? No, I probably, we're on Instagram, but so maybe next few years, who knows? If that's how we have to get to the youth. But I feel like at the same time, like we're saying, everything is on a device that is constantly in our hands. Like knowledge is power. If you want to look up something, if you want to know if you want to understand why is everyone outside Castilia with pictures of John Paul Sophia? Ask, speak, be present, look at the news portals, like Emma said, not just locally, internationally. I think that's my biggest concern, right? Is that I feel from what I'm seeing again, and I'm in an age group of like going into 30, right? So I don't know, but like this kind of age bracket between 20 and 30, there's this kind of, when I look on social media, there's so much, right? It's very overwhelming. And I can understand that. But I always think that people are kind of more on the side of like influencer lifestyle and look at all the products I use and this is my lifestyle and 30 seconds of my morning routine. And okay, fair enough. But I feel like it's really important to understand outside that bubble, right? So we have elections coming up. This project is part of the European Parliament elections in June, and sometimes I'm speaking to people and they're like, "We are shorta, like, does it really matter?" And this is what concerns me. So I think wrapping into what Emma said, like fantastic, knowledge is power, be present.
If I may add one more thing, I mean, I'm 31 at the moment. I know, giveaway, but still, it took me a while.
I'm 29, it's okay.
You're younger than me. I realized from what you said. I was like, it's okay. It's okay. But didn't it take you a while to figure out how our vote works, Giulia?
Yeah, for sure. Because we didn't have the education for that.
It's wild to me that this has been our voting system for like our entire independent democracy, right?
Yeah.
And not once did anyone sit me down and was like, sweet girl, let me tell you how to vote. What does it mean? What is a single transferable vote? What
Yeah.
happens if you vote here and then here?
Mhm.
I mean, no one in, I don't even want to count the years of formal education, but like no one ever
Mhm.
sat me down and told me how that works. And that is absolutely wild to me. It is unhinged that we expect our democracy to actually function when we haven't even taught people how a vote works.
I've been out of school for a long time, so I'm really hope that this has changed. But I don't know anyone who's still at like primary and secondary school.
I do.
Okay.
Like,
Okay. No.
so far, I've heard nothing. But
Okay, okay.
I hope I'm wrong. If anyone who ever watches this finds out if there's anything in your curriculum, please text me and let me know.
Let us know.
Yes,
Please.
I mean that's absolutely wild to me, and it's not a point of patronization. Like I'm not saying young people don't know how to vote, don't understand the vote. I mean it's a really difficult concept. It took
Yeah.
me literally running for election to figure out how the vote truly works.
I think it's also important. Sorry, I interrupted you. But this last point, like you're saying, it's not that youths don't know or anything, but I also think it's really interesting because those youths can then share it with their friends and maybe their parents and all these kind of, and like the information spreads. Isn't that amazing?
I mean, I'm certain there are people who think that it would invalidate their vote if they voted for more than one party on the same ballot sheet.
I hope not.
Oh, of course there are. I've heard that myself.
Oh
And I
God.
was like, no, that's not a thing. That isn't how it works. And I had to explain it. But I mean, if I've met these people, I assume that there are more people that I haven't met that share that thought. And that's a very terrifying concept because people are going to vote, which is great. Please
Yeah.
do go vote. But please understand how the vote works. And if you don't, ask someone who does.
Exactly.
So ask your local politician, ask the person who's asking for your vote how it works. Like these people are going to be knocking on your door and they are going to be telling you, hi, please vote for me. When they do that, please ask them to explain to you how the vote works. It is a very difficult concept. Like, I am not overselling it. It is a very complex concept. Like, it's not straightforward at all. Like, at all. I was shocked when I figured it all out. Like, so 1 and 2, and
Yes.
if 1 gets elected immediately, then your 2 and 3 doesn't really count as much. Like, it's a whole thing.
Yes, it is. It really is. Every time there's an election coming around, I think I need to sit down and just spend the morning reading this through. Because yeah, it is very complicated.
And not only that, check who's on your ballot sheet.
Yeah.
Like, just Google them. Google them one time. It doesn't need to be like a deep dive dossier kind of thing. Just Google them once and see what they stand for. Go on their social media. See where they went the past couple of days. What did they do? Are they hanging out with people at the dog sanctuary? Do they care about animals? Or do they go hunting? Whichever one of those things floats your boat. Vote accordingly,
Mhm.
At least know. Don't just, go down the list. Like, I have a lot of opinions about this. A lot. I could go on for a while, so I'll stop.
Okay, what is one or more ways you would like to see improvement when it comes to the freedom and power of expression in Malta?
I think very quickly, I think I already mentioned that, and I believe in my role, I think the most important thing is that we protect those people. We protect these freedom of expressions, right? And we take them seriously. So, for example, there are still people who I know, if there's a protest happening, or even not a protest, even a vigil, they're not gonna go because they're thinking, what they'll see me, and what if that person sees me, and this I call it like the small island syndrome, where we're always concerned that someone is watching us and that someone's going to tell someone else who will tell them, and it's all
That's
just goes.
legitimate.
Hmm?
Like, it's a legitimate fear.
Yes, it is because
Scary.
it is, for sure it is, because I experience that. I mean, I am there, but I see this from people, and again, it ties into again social media. So, for example, this thing with John Paul Sophia, people were constantly posting on Facebook on the day, go to the vigil, do this, and this is amazing. Don't get me wrong, that this we shouldn't take social media for granted. It's a very powerful tool when used correctly. But then when you're there, when you're at any kind of vigil or protest, I feel in Malta, it's always the same 20, 30 faces, which is great. We need those activists. These activists are, you know, God bless them. They do an amazing job and amazing. But at the same time, I'm like, where's everyone else? Yes,
More.
we need more. So I feel like in the field of like we were saying, protests and just expressing your voice and everything, there are so many. It doesn't have to be political. I mean, I know protest is a form of politics in a sense, but I feel there are so many things that you can just stand up and voice your opinion correctly again. But there are loads of things. And again, another point, how we can improve in Malta, again, for as a journalist, it's I should feel safe in my job to do my job correctly and pre provide people the information they need and the truth. Yet at the same time, there's always this big question mark of, well, am I safe? Maybe not just for like, again, I'm the journalist who, like I said, my fingers are in lots of different pies. I do a lot of human stories, but I have colleagues of mine who deal with deep investigative work. And, there are days when I'm like, I hope they're okay. I hope the big story comes out. I'm like, I hope whoever is their source, whatever it is, they're fine and they're safe. Because we've already had a case where a journalist wasn't safe. She was killed, and that's a really big lesson that we need to learn when it comes to freedom of expression. So yeah,
For
that's my
sure. For sure. I mean, I can't add on much to that. That was a really well put answer. But I do feel like if there is ever a scenario where you do feel unsafe, you do need to prioritize that feeling. But then also remember that if you feel unsafe going to this particular protest, perhaps go to this one instead
yeah,
or do something else.
yeah,
And I mean, while I might feel unsafe at Vigil A, I know that if I were to go to something about racism, then I am there from a privileged standpoint.
Yeah,
So
very
then I
true.
need to turn up, and there is a duty, I believe, on my part to turn up when I am safe,
Very
you know,
true.
when I am not at danger of either physical harm or losing my job or any of that. So maybe if you're on probation, you don't want to go to a protest, but you make sure that as soon as you're done with that, you are there, you do get some free passes. I totally understand the fear. We can't legitimately ask people to risk their jobs, I get it. But when you're done, like you go, like
Mhm.
you do get the free pass 100,000%, and your safety is always paramount. But when it's not an issue of safety, I think we do need to turn up, and we need to turn up in droves.
Yes.
I don't know if that answered your question, Patricia.
Not even sure what the question was at this point.
It's fine. It's fine.
Me and Emma are just having fun talking.
Time.
Moving on, how can we educate, safeguard, and empower youths to express themselves freely?
I think the education part is really important. I think there does need to be something like civic education in our curriculum. Sort of, I know there was something in systems of knowledge when I was at junior college. I'm not sure what that's like now. I haven't looked into it. But I do remember it being about art and democracy and all of this. And I think that might be a really good place to update the syllabus on sort of, I don't know, how an FS3 works, how your vote works, these things that you leave school and you're like, those are really a lot of years of education, and I still don't know these absolute basic things,
Mhm.
or a list of who you can ask if you have a question on this or on this. Even just the resources are an important tool. Sort
Mhm.
of, I mean, I'm very active on social media as a feminist and as a lawyer. So I have a lot of people who would speak to me and ask me about, for example, things like abortion in Malta and the legality thereof, because they understand that I am a safe space to come to if they have any questions in that regard. And I know that just like I would be there for a topic of abortion or domestic violence, for example, there are other activists in different spheres that you could approach who I'm sure would be happy to be approached, in all of their spheres of knowledge as well. So I feel like if we start at resources and ensuring that young people have access to these things, that's already a huge win.
The problem is that some young people, as I'm seeing in schools, are not interested in any of that. So they feel demotivated and they don't want to know anything about that. As you mentioned, systems of knowledge. No one really pays attention to what's going on in class. We have been explained how the vote works, but no one paid attention to what was going on because it was not for the syllabus, so it wasn't for the exam. So they saw
Mhm.
it as a way of just chilling in
Mhm.
class and not doing anything.
I mean, I get that. I mean, student apathy, even when I was at uni, was at an
Yeah.
all-time high. So I'm sure it just kept on rising after my days at uni as well. And I don't know the answer to that. Genuinely, I straight up do not know how to fix that.
Mhm.
But I believe that there have to be people who do have answers to those questions, and those people need to be mined for information at this point in time, because it needs to be tackled like literally like a pandemic, because it is a very scary thing that honestly will have a massive impact on our democracy in the coming years. So
Yeah. I don't think I have much to add to what Emma said because she said it so perfectly. But something maybe that Patricia, like you said, people are not interested because it's not part of the curriculum. Then I start to question maybe could it be taught in a different way?
Exactly.
Perhaps,
Suggest.
perhaps, instead of just sitting down in class. And I mean, I remember, so I only enjoyed it because I was like, oh, I love social studies, I love democracy, I love studying arts and environment, so I really enjoyed it. But yeah, for sure, some people are just there to tick the box. But maybe this is where we keep talking about education, where you can say, okay, this needs to be taught, but maybe we can teach it in a different way, right? What is everyone doing? Everyone's constantly on reels. So maybe should we do like maybe you give students this project of saying you have to create 30-second reel and describing For example, reduce, reuse, recycle. One. The other person is doing the voting system. Maybe that's a way of saying, oh, wow, okay, this is not technically part of the exam, but it's a project and I'm still gaining something in a fun way.
I fully agree with that. I mean, I was one of those people who did not go to SOC because she enjoyed it. She went because she had to. So for me, it was like, I'm looking at this beautiful art on a PowerPoint presentation when we could have just gone to a museum, for example.
Agreed.
You
Agreed.
know,
Yeah.
I was on
Yeah.
the fourth floor of junior college, bored out of my mind in a dull room, looking at like, what's that painting of the pipe that says something in French? It's not a pipe.
So the
"Ce n'est
five. Oh gosh, what was that? I actually had a project on that guy. I can't remember.
have vivid memory of seeing this art on a PowerPoint screen, like the projector screen, and I was like, okay, like I could literally just be at a museum. It would be way better
Yeah.
than this. Why am I here? And I
Yeah.
fully agree with what you said, Julia, about sort of making education for your students rather than having your students fit the mold of education, which is what we're so used to. I mean, attention spans aren't what they used to be either. Let's be
No.
realistic.
And again, I'm saying this, and I'm not a teacher, so I can't begin to imagine how difficult it is to prepare all that work and be like, screw this journalist telling me to prepare a reel. Like, but it is just a suggestion because I'm fully aware. Like I see this about attention spans, we in terms of Malta, our articles, we have like the time, how long it takes you to read an article. And like sometimes we have 7 minutes, and I'm thinking, no one's gonna spend 7 minutes reading that. And it's true. Attention span is what it is. And we see that with readers who are, of a certain age, much older than us. They're no longer youths, let's say it politely, but like but it's true. So I honestly think I forgot the question, but I stand with what Emma said earlier about education. Before
I
we,
mean,
we move on to another topic on education.
totally read your article if it was 7 minutes long, Julia. But like
Thank-
what I do see on a number of international publications, for example, is
Mhm.
the option to listen to the article,
Yes, it's very good.
which
Like
I love
podcast.
because I mean I spend a lot of time in my car, right? So obviously you can't
Mm,
read an article in your car, but you
no,
can listen to an article.
true.
That's another thing. And I mean, I have a very short attention span. I feel like it's been there my whole life. And now with, reels and social media, it's getting even worse. So I can't
Mm.
imagine what young people are doing. And again, as you said, just to reiterate, teachers must have like the patience of saints. Straight up, I could never do that job. So what we're saying is totally just a suggestion. Please, you do mad respect for everything that they do because like I could never.
No, no. I did this for one summer and I was like, no.
No, I used to teach English as a foreign language and I used to love it. But I had like a fun group of students. Well, I think I just got really lucky. I did it for about 5 or 6 summers. It
That's
was great.
amazing.
But again, like not the same as teaching kids every single day for the
No.
rest of your life.
True.
So
Now, what is the final word of advice you would like to share to young people in Malta?
Go ahead, Emma. I think we've said it all, but yeah.
I feel like we have, but if we're going to be like super like succinct about it and concise, I would say just like you do you, just do so respectfully. When you don't know, ask. You do not know it all. I don't know it all. We all don't know it all. We're just, we're swimming along, hoping for the best. I think the world is a very scary place right now. I think I mean, it's scary even from a privileged vantage point, even just to watch what's going on around the world in Ukraine, in Palestine, everywhere else. I mean, every day there's a new tragedy that we have to read about. So, can you imagine having to live it? But alas, just reading about it, again, from this very privileged vantage point, for me, it's just so important that we continue to read, continue to learn, sort of never stop asking questions. If you think you're annoying when you're asking why, like that was my family always used to be like, she doesn't stop. And I'm like, no, I'm just curious. Like I just need to know. And it's not a bad thing. Just keep asking questions, keep being entirely authentically yourselves, and don't be like ashamed of your opinions. Honestly, read leave space for your opinions to grow, to develop, to sort of evolve with you, because your opinion when you're 20 is not going to be your opinion when you're 30. Even if it's rooted in the same opinion, even if it's pretty much the same, there will be something that you learn that makes it different. And my opinion today is not going to be the same as my opinion in 10 years. It's like, let's not cement ourselves into molds that we can't keep up with. That would be exhausting for us to try to keep up with. So I think living with grace and giving other people the grace to change as well is a really important fundamental point that I think could be a takeaway from this.
Definitely. And if I can add to what Emma's saying, you know, about reading and keeping and, you know, just being open to learning more. Another point, I don't like to be doom and gloom, but it's something that I think really comes with expression as well, tied into it, is really be careful with loads of fake news, right? Again, like especially the idea, I can't say younger people because we all, us three, I think we all spend a huge majority of time on our phones, constantly getting information in sound bites, and sometimes you don't even take note of what's being said. And I think it's important, like Emma's saying, you know, yes, read, form ideas, gain information, but question that information. You know, just take a minute to say, am I reading or what I'm looking at? Because sometimes an image is now even created, you know, like AI, insane, mind blown every time I see an AI photo. You know, is this real? And if it's not, why? What is it trying to tell me? You know, I think, like I said, going back to what I said earlier with the power and the responsibility, you know, we should really, for youth, I think, really just be out there, learn, and do it with a good eye. You know?
Yes, think
And
critically.
think critically. Yeah.
Yes.
And never stop learning. Because like Emma said, you know, don't mold yourself into something because again, we live on an island. There is like we always find our own clique and something where people agree with us. You know, out there, not just Europe, the world, there are so many people who we're gonna get along with, and there are people we don't, and we still have to respect them. So it's really interesting to constantly learn from other people and people from different perspectives. And yes, that's
Sure.
my 10 cents.
Thank you so much for answering all the questions.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yes, this has been super fun. Thank you.
Thanks. I really enjoyed it more than I thought I would.
That's very
Thank you for watching our podcast. We hope you found it fruitful. So, what are we going to do with these podcasts?
On the 11th of May at the Valletta Design Cluster, our young people will be sharing the results of these podcasts and the research around the project to our guests, which will include MEPs and MEP candidates of the upcoming election.
Join us on the 11th of May at the Valletta Design Cluster by registering through the link on this post or by contacting us on info@ymcamalta.org.
See you there.